Welcome to my practical guide on using WP-CLI. Learn how to install WordPress in under 10 seconds with common commands and manage your site effortlessly. Don't forget to subscribe for more. Now let's get started. As I'm using Valet to serve my local sites, and I have a parked folder that allows me to create subfolders, anything in those subfolders allows me to serve them through Valet as a website. So I've got a folder here called WP-CLI, and because my TLD or top level domain is set to test, my local domain will be called wp-cli.test, which at the moment is an empty folder, but I'm going to use this domain stroke folder to show you examples of using WP-CLI. But before we do that, I just want to go through some of the techniques I'm going to be using and explain what WP-CLI actually does and how to navigate through the internal documentation. If you don't have WP-CLI installed, here's a link in the top right of this video to one of my previous videos that will show you exactly how to do that. So to initiate WP-CLI from the command line, once you've got everything installed and set up correctly, all you need to do to instigate it is to type WP in your terminal. And this will pull up all the documentation on WP-CLI. And we get a description of what WP is, the synopsis or an example of how we can use it. And as we can see, we can initialize these by typing WP followed by whatever the subcommand is you want to use. So looking down the list, we can see all of the core commands. We've got a command for config, we've got one for core, export, import, media, plugin, post, scaffold, and various other things. Moving down the documentation, we can see we can also combine these commands together with global parameters listed here. So to close the documentation, I just need to press Q on my keyboard and that will bring me back to my terminal. Now there's a particular parameter I'll be using throughout this video, and this will allow me to dig deeper into how to use all of these individual commands, and that's going to be -help. If we run this command on WP, so wp-help, this will again bring up the main documentation again, and it's exactly the same as the page before. I can also use the help parameter to also look deeper into any of the subcommands. For instance, we can take a look at any of these other subcommands that are actually listed here. For now, let's take a look at the command for core. So again, if I hit Q to clear my screen, get back to my terminal. So type wp core -help, and this will give me a deeper look at the command itself. So we can see that the description says downloads, installs, updates, and manages WordPress installation. And the synopsis or usage example is wp core followed by one of the following subcommands. Now the greater than or less than symbol denotes that we can use any one of these following commands in the list. So we can see we can check updates, download, install, check if it's a WordPress installation, convert it to a multi-site, install as a multi-site, run a database update procedure, and so on. The command I'm interested in for the next step is going to be download. So again, if I press Q on my keyboard to come back to my terminal. So now type wp core download -help. And again, this is going to give me a description of what the command does and also a synopsis or usage example of how we can use the parameters listed under the options with a description of what those parameters do. Now, any command that's got square brackets is an optional command, and we can see from the options section a description of what that command does. So if we're going to use the download URL, this parameter is basically going to get the WordPress core download directly from the provided URL instead of fetching from the URL from the WordPress.org servers. Another optional command that you might want to use is the -path parameter. Now you'll notice this parameter is shown with an equal symbol, which it generally means that you need to type in your own variable. In the case of using the -path parameter, you would insert the path into which you wish to install the WordPress core files from within the current directory. For instance, if you're installing into a subdirectory of blog or WP or similar, if you already have a hosted website in your current root directory. Another optional command parameter is --locale, and this equals to the set of codes that represents the actual language version of the WordPress that you want to download, or the WordPress core files that you want to download. In my case, it's going to be en-gb, which stands for English Great Britain or UK. Now there are English US versions and English Australian versions and various other versions. And there'll be a specific code for specific country languages. So if you want the French version or the Dutch version, there'll be a specific code key locale for that version. And again, we can use the -- version parameter to select a particular release version of WordPress core. And this might be of particular interest to a plugin or theme developer who wants to test their plugin or theme against a particular release version of WordPress. And there's some other commands that I'm not going to go into, so feel free to browse through them and investigate them at your leisure. So if I hit Q, I'm going to come back to my terminal. Now I'm going to type in WP core download -locale equals en_GB and hit return to run that command in my empty folder. And as we can see, that has actually pulled down the zip file and it's unzipped it for me, and it's telling me success WordPress downloaded. That's perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. We can see here that we have a configuration sample file, but we don't actually have the wp-config.php file. Now, the wp-config.php file is quite important as it allows us to access our database, and it has some configuration settings for our WordPress website. So let's take another look at the documentation to see what we can now do. So I'll run wp-help, and we can see that we have a config command that generates and reads the wp-config file, which is what we're looking for. So if I hit Q, I'm going to come back to my terminal. Then run wp-config-help, and we can examine some of the options that we can use for that command. Now, the description states that it generates and reads the wp-config file. The synopsis or example usage is wp-config followed by the desired subcommand. The subcommands include create, delete, edit, get, has, list, etc. Since we want to create a wp-config file, let's proceed with that. So if I hit Q to go back to my terminal. Now let's take a closer look at the wp-config create command. So wp-config create -help. In the synopsis, examples are provided, followed by parameters. As mentioned earlier, parameters enclosed in a square bracket are usually optional. However, if a bracket lacks square brackets, it generally means it's mandatory or required. Therefore, we'll need to run wp-config create and provide a database name, username, and password. Even though it's marked as optional, in this example, the password is always necessary for connecting to a database, despite the example suggesting otherwise. Sometimes examples are a little bit inconsistent, but we have to work with what we have, I guess. Now let's look at the example. So we need to run wp-config create, and we'll require the following information: the database name, database user, a password, the host, which is usually localhost, and a database prefix. Often the default is WP_, but you can customize it. So using a unique prefix actually adds extra layer of security, since hackers typically look for the WP_ as a common prefix. If it doesn't exist, you're basically enhancing the database security. There are other settings, but we won't focus on those. I just want to focus on the essentials. So database name, username, password, and prefix. If I hit Q on my keyboard just to come back to my terminal. So let's run this command. So wp-config create --db name equals WP-CLI, which is going to be my database, and --db user equals root, which is the username for to access my database, and --db pass equals password, which this isn't my genuine password, by the way, and --db prefix equals the standard default WP_, and we'll hit return. And now that has successfully created my config file, and we can open that up and examine it, and we can see that all the necessary definitions are in place: the database name, username, password, localhost, and the database prefix. Now, to demonstrate that that did actually work as we expected, we can run the same command but with a different prefix, and I'll do that. But first of all, what I'm going to do is to just remove this configuration file. So delete that. and then I'm going to run the exact same command again, but this time I want to change the prefix to something more random. So now we can see that our configuration file has been created, but it should be completely different. So we've got our username, password, localhost, and now if we look at our prefix, it's completely different. So that just demonstrates how you can add another layer of security to your database. But I'm just going to turn this back to the default for now because it's not necessary for the purposes of this video. Now there are other things you can do. If we already have the config file open, we can look at our salts here. Now the salts are essentially secret keys for cookies and user logins. So in some cases you might want to change these to clear cookies or reset user sessions. So let's type wp-config-help to see what options we've got. So we can see we've got shuffle-salts, and that refreshes the salts defined in our wp-config file. So we can change them by using wp-config-shuffle-salts command, which will immediately change our salts. So if I go Q, come back to my terminal, and I can demonstrate that. Again, with our wp-config file, we can set other things like enabling debugging. So if we go to wp-config-help, looking at the subcommand list, we see we've got set, and set sets the value of a specific constant or variable defined in the wp-config.php file. So if we hit Q, we can come back to our terminal. So if we type wp-config set wp-debug true, so watching our config file and running this command, let's see what happens. So although this will work, the second parameter in the defined wp-debug has been set as a string, and it should actually be a boolean. So let's take another look at our documentation. So if we go wp-config set --help. So in our synopsis we can see an example of some of the parameters, and one of those parameters is --raw. So what does that do? So if we look at our description for the options, we can see here that it says place the value into your wp-config.php file as is instead of as a quoted string. So this is probably what we're looking for. Rather than putting it in as a string, it should put it in as a boolean. So if we hit quit and then we come back, we run the same command, but this time we put --raw, and we can see that now is set to a boolean. So perfect. So even though we have our WordPress installation set up, our configuration files in place, including references to the database, username and password, and our config file, we haven't actually created the database itself. So to instruct WordPress to create the database, let's refer to our documentation again. So we go wp-help, and if we explore the subcommands, we can see that we've got a command for db, which performs a basic database operation using credentials stored in your wp-config file. So if we hit Q and we come back, to delve deeper into the db command, we'll run wp-db-help. In the documentation information, we'll find a description and a synopsis wp-db followed by the command we want to use and a list of subcommands below. The one we're interested in is create, with a description of creates a new database, which is precisely what we need. Now to exit the documentation, press Q. Now this command will utilize all the information from our wp-config.php file, and it will create the database from the information that we've set in this file. And to create the database, all we need to do is to type wp-db create. Now to verify this, I'm using a GUI tool called MySQL SQL Pro. I'll access my localhost and look for the database I've named WP-CLI, and indeed we can see the database has been successfully created. Now this ensures that the WordPress installation has a functioning database in place. Now what we've accomplished so far is to set up our WordPress installation, set all the configuration elements in our wp-config.php file, and created a database. However, what we haven't done yet is to run the core installation. And the core installation is the classic 5-minute process you encounter with your WordPress site when you use the user interface. And during this process, you're required to input things like the site title, username, password, and administration email address. Now these things, once you run this installation, all of these things get saved to the database. So how can we do this with WP-CLI? So if we go back to our installation, now type wp-help and we get an error. And the error says the site you've requested is not installed. Run wp core install to create database tables. Now this makes sense because all we've done is create an empty database. So let's run wp core install --help to get more details on what that command actually means. Now in the documentation, we find that this command is used to run a standard WordPress installation process. And the synopsis or usage example shows wp core install followed by some subcommands. Now, as I mentioned earlier, parameters without brackets or symbols generally indicate that they are mandatory. And we have a mandatory URL parameter. Now, if there's an equals sign, this means we must provide our own parameters or parameter values. In this case, we need to provide a URL, a title, administration username, administration email address. Now the administration password is optional. If omitted, WordPress will actually generate a password for you. Alongside that, we have an option to set local or skip email. Now for the purposes of this, we need to just provide the full mandatory parameters for URL, title, admin username, and admin email. And I'll also include the password just for completeness. So the quickest way to use this line is to copy what's provided in the documentation, and then I'm going to hit Q to return back to my terminal. I'll paste in that line I've just copied and make all the necessary adjustments. This includes changing the admin email, the password, username, title. Now if there are any spaces in your parameters, it's advisable to encapsulate them with quotations. In my case, I'll set the title to quote WP-CLI practical guide end quote and adjust the URL accordingly. Finally, running this command will initiate the installation process in the background, and upon success, WordPress should be installed. And we got an error. And that's probably because I've got a return here when I shouldn't have it. So I'll just fix that and run that line again. Now to test all this works, all I need to do is to go to a web browser and input the URL for my test site. And there it is, a fully functioning WordPress installation up and running. Now I'll just log into this. So I'll head to the admin login page. I'll enter my username and I'll enter my secure password, which wasn't very secure. And with that, as you can see, although we've got some updates, we have a successfully installed a fully functional WordPress site, all accomplished from the command line using WP-CLI. Now, let's explore what else we can do with WP-CLI. There are various things at our disposal, such as activating and deleting plugins, removing themes, and generating test posts, to just name a few. So let's dive into one of these commands. So returning to our trusty command line, we'll type in wp-help to consult the documentation once more. Now, if we look for a command related to plugins, we can see that we can use the plugin command, and that manages plugins, including installs, activations, and updates. So let's focus on that. So press Q to return to my terminal, and I'll use wp plugin -help to explore the available commands for managing plugins. Now the list includes options like activate, auto update, deactivate, delete, get and install, etc. Now my goal is I want to install a plugin, and here's how we can do that. So every plugin in the repository has a unique slug associated with it. Now this slug corresponds to a reference in the WordPress plugins repository, and you can directly install a plugin into your WordPress installation using this slug. An example would be considering the widely known SEO plugin Yoast SEO. But how do we find that? and how do we install it using WP-CLI? Well, all we need to know is the plugin slug. So let's find an example by looking at the WordPress plugins directory in our WordPress installation. I'll search for SEO in the plugin directory. And once I locate the SEO plugin for Yoast, I'll click on it to access the details page. Now on this page you'll find the plugin slug in the URL. In this case, the slug for the Yoast SEO plugin is WordPress-SEO. Now this slug is the reference that we can use to install plugins directly from WP-CLI. Now you can use this approach for any plugin that's available in the WordPress plugins repository. So once again, if we refer to WP plugin install --help, we can delve deeper into the available parameters. In the synopsis or example, you'll notice it mentions that we can use WP plugin install followed by the plugin name, zip file or URL. What we're truly interested in is the URL, specifically the slug from the WordPress plugins repository. You have the option to load specific versions, force it to download, which means that even if you have a previous version installed, you can overwrite it. Additionally, you can activate it immediately and there are network activation options. There's also the insecure option, which allows you to download it without using SSL. Now what I'm interested in is using WP plugin install. I have my reference, which is WordPress-SEO, and I want to activate it right away. So if I hit Q to exit the menu, the command I need to run is WP plugin install WordPress-SEO --activate. This command will download the zip file version, unpack it and activate it. Now the command should return a success message, indicate that it's been installed and activated as a plugin. Now to confirm, navigate to your website's administration section, click on plugins, and you'll see that the SEO plugin has been successfully installed and is activated. Perfect. Now with every standard WordPress installation, the Hello Dolly plugin comes by default, but we can remove this from the command line as well. So let's consult WP plugin --help command to understand how to do this. You'll notice there's a parameter or subcommand named delete. It deletes the plugin files without deactivating or uninstalling them. This is the command we need. Now another way to find out what the slug of a plugin is to simply look in the plugin directory in the WP-content folder. So as hello is a single plugin file called hello.php, so all I need to do is to run wp plugin delete hello. So back to the command line, and I'll run wp plugin delete hello. After executing this command, it should return a success message indicating that one plugin has been deleted. Now to verify this, onto our website, navigate to a dashboard, click on plugins, and you should see that the Hello Dolly plugin has been successfully removed. Perfect. Once again, with a standard WordPress installation, a set of themes comes bundled by default. Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes I find managing these themes cumbersome, especially as time goes on. However, with WordPress 6.3, they've actually removed some of the bundled themes. But the good news is we can still manage these themes from the WP command line. For example, let's say our default theme is 2023, but we want to remove the other themes that come bundled with the WordPress installation. This is quite simple to do. All we need to know is the slug for the theme. Now if we take a look at the theme details for 2021, you'll notice that in the URL the theme is equal to 2021. And similarly, if we inspect 2022 theme, we'll find in the slug it says 2022. And now at the time of recording this video, we're actually at 6.4. Bundled with this installation comes 2024, so I'm going to leave that theme there for the moment. So once again, all we need to do is to return to our terminal and consult WP help documentation. And here we can see there's a command for themes or theme in the context of using the command line. And the description says manage themes including installs, activation and updates. Now to delve deeper into the theme command, we can just hit Q and then we'll type WP theme help. Now by executing WP theme --help, we reveal various commands such as activate, auto update, delete, disable, enable, get and much more. Now the specific command I'm interested in is delete, and this allows us to delete one or more themes. So hit Q to exit. Now to use it, all we need to do is to type WP theme delete followed by the slug for the theme that we want to delete. In my case, I want to delete 2021 and 2022. Now if I return back to the website and navigate to themes under the appearance section, you'll see that those themes have now been removed. So excellent, we've successfully cleaned up our themes directly from the command line. Alternatively, you might want to test the plugin against some automatically generated posts. So let's demonstrate how we can generate posts from WP-CLI. To do this, first let's consult our documentation. Now in our search we're looking for information related to post. And we can see that we can manage post content and metadata from the command line. Now utilizing metadata can be particularly useful if you need to set up any custom metadata specifically for plugin tests. So we're interested in looking deeper into post. So let's hit Q, then type wp post --help. Within our subcommand we can find create for creating new post, delete, edit, exists, and one that says generate. Now this generate command will allow us to create posts with ease. So let's hit Q and return back to our terminal and proceed to explore the documentation for generate command by running wp post generate --help. So here in the synopsis we can see an example usage, and we can see that we can generate posts to set the post. We can set a count to specify the number of posts. We can set the post type. Now WordPress comes by default post types for posts. These are generally for your blog posts, and pages for static pages. And there are also custom post types that plugin authors can generate or themes can generate. We can also define the post status, whether or not it should be published or in draft. We can set the post title, and additionally we can designate the post author, which is identified by usually the user login or the email address. And there are many more settings such as post date and post content and max depth. Now for our demonstration, I'm going to generate 10 random pages with specific post dates. I want these pages to be published, and I want to attribute them to myself, which means using my email address as the author. Furthermore, I'm going to create a parent-child relationship amongst these pages by setting a max depth. Now if I set a depth of 1, which is the default, the pages will all be on the same level. However, if I set a depth of 2, there'll be a parent-child relationship. If I set a depth of 3, there'll be a parent-child-child page relationship, and so on. Now, there's an important note regarding the post content parameter. We'll notice that if set, the command reads the post content from stdin, which stands for standard input. And what this means is you'll need to use the echo command on the command line to provide the input you want as the post content. Now let me demonstrate it for you. Now I have an example command that I've copied and pasted into my terminal, and I'll explain what's happening. So in this command you'll see echo, which is used to send the text as the standard input, and there's a special marker called a pipe, and this allows us to chain commands together. Essentially what I'm doing here is echoing the text, and the post content parameter will pick up that text from the standard input, which is the echo, and after that I'm adding the WordPress related parameters. So here's a breakdown. I'm running WP generate, I'm setting the post type as page, specifying the date to be 2023-09-08 at 5 PM, setting it to published as the post status, attributing the post to my email address as the author, generating 10 pages with a maximum depth of 2 for a child or parent-child association or relationship, and the final parameter, post content, is set to pick up the text, the quick brown fox, from the standard input. Now when I run this command you'll see that WP-CLI generates the posts really swiftly, 100% complete, and it took virtually no time at all. Now if we navigate back to our website and visit our pages section, and we can see that our pages have been generated and they're listed here with automatically generated titles, page 1, page 2, etc. And they follow a sequential order, and additionally we can see some random parent-child pages, which is precisely what we intended. Now let's explore the content of some of these pages, and we can confirm that the content has been set to the quick brown fox that we set in the command line. If we check the page post date as well, and you'll notice it's been set to September the 18th at 5 PM. Now any discrepancies in the date settings may be attributed to your particular WordPress installation versus your server settings, but you should get a clear understanding of how these commands now work. Now these commands provide a practical example of what you can actually achieve with WP-CLI. You can also use WP-CLI to create and manage users, which can be helpful when running tests or automating certain tasks. Now, automation tools can be used to test your website against specific user roles. For example, if you wanted to test the functionality of a member with a specific role, you can create a user with the role of member using WP-CLI and run an automated test to check if that user can log in and access various pages and features. But this could be an idea for another video. For now, I hope you found this video useful as a practical guide to using WP-CLI. Now, before I go, and as promised, here's an added bonus. I'm going to start from scratch by removing all of my files from this installation, and I'm going to delete the database. But this time I'm going to bundle all of the commands I've just demonstrated and show you how you can set this up in a single bash script and run it with a single command. And trust me, this is way quicker than running through the standard 5-minute install. So I have all my commands here in a single file, and I've called it wp-install.sh, and it's sitting in my root directory. Now to run this, all I have to do from the command line is run sh space wp install.sh. Now there's the core download, configuration setup, database creation, core install, plugin removal, theme removal, and post generation. So there you have it. That's my practical guide to using WP-CLI. As always, if you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, then please leave them in the comments below. If you want to see more videos like this, then please do subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.